I hate myself. I hate what I've done. I crossed every line I swore I never would. I let weakness win. I let loneliness rot me from the inside out until I became unrecognizable, pathetic, desperate, disgusting. I was a mother first. A protector. And I shattered that for what? A look? A message? A fantasy that never should have been real? I poisoned the sacred with my selfishness. I destroyed trust for a moment of feeling alive. I am the villain now, reckless, careless, unforgivable. I want to tear my heart out just to stop feeling this shame. I don't deserve grace. I don't deserve anything. If you read the title of the video, it's strange, isn't it, how something so small, so trivial it could have gone unnoticed can unravel the seams of an entire life. If anyone had told me that a moment so mundane would be the beginning of everything breaking apart, I would have laughed, but now looking back I realize that chaos doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it slips in quietly disguised as a loose belt and an awkward request. I was folding laundry in the living room, mind adrift in the rhythm of soft cotton and silence, when I heard him. "Hey, can you help me with this?" Caleb's voice echoed from the hallway. Casual, innocent, I turned, half expecting a minor nuisance, maybe a stuck zipper or a wrinkled shirt, but what I saw instead startled me. He was standing by the stairs, one hand tugging at a twisted belt, the other awkwardly trying to hold up his khaki shorts that were barely hanging onto his hips. "It's jammed or something," he said, stepping closer. The leather strap curled oddly through the buckle like it had knotted itself on purpose. I set the towels aside. "Let me see." I don't remember breathing as I reached for the belt. I was focused, my fingers moving with delicate precision, trying to loosen the stubborn loop still stuck. I murmured more to myself than to him. He held his breath and nodded, his body tense like he was bracing for something more than a belt to come undone. Then it happened. The buckle gave way suddenly, completely, and the short slip slid down with such finality that it felt like time itself stuttered. They fell to his ankles with a soft thud, and for a second the world stood perfectly still. I looked down, just a reflex, and then immediately turned my eyes away, a flush rushing to my cheeks. I had seen more than I should have, more than I wanted to, and in that flash of exposure something intangible shifted between us. He didn't move, just stood there frozen, his hands hovering in the air like he didn't know where to put them. His face was flushed with a deep burning red. Sorry," he mumbled, reaching down to pull his shorts back up clumsily like a child caught doing something wrong. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. It's okay," I said, though the words felt too small, too insufficient for the weight that now hung in the air. He looked at me, really looked, and whispered, "Thanks for the help." And then he was gone. He fled up the stairs, leaving behind only the echo of his steps and the wild beating of my own heart. "It is all right, this is a fact," he stutteringly responded. "Yeah, thanks for the assistance." At that moment he hurriedly went upstairs, leaving me alone with my heart hammering. Initially it had been an accident, a fleeting and unpleasant time. Nevertheless, after that, something significant occurred between us. It was impossible for me to shake the impression that things had altered, and the air had a charged quality to it, in spite of the fact that neither of us ever brought it up in conversation. Our friendship was never the same after that day. It's not exactly a fairy tale that my marriage to Ruben might be described as. In addition to that, it wasn't terrible. It was nothing more than a calm and comforting routine that had gradually lost its warmth after both of us had been through unsuccessful first marriages. We tied the knot when I was 44 years old and he was 50 years old. Ruben was a creature of habit, and he kept himself busy by playing golf, going fishing, and having dinners at work on a consistently regular basis. My days were filled with gardening, volunteering for charitable organizations, and keeping the house clean. I had learned to accept the stillness that existed between us soon after Caleb moved in. The kid that Ruben had from his first marriage had always been courteous, but he had always been distant. In the early years of my marriage I had only seen him on a few occasions, and those occasions were during the required holiday trips that he had to make while he was still in college. He was always reserved and awkward, in the manner that young men typically behave when they are introduced to new stepmothers. Although it had been 6 years since I had last seen him, the man who turned up at our doorstep was not the same guarded youth I had known after graduating from high School Caleb was having a hard time figuring out how to navigate the world. In light of the fact that his degree in fine arts, which Ruben did not place much importance on, had not resulted in any success, Ruben offered him a place to stay while he worked out his issues. It didn't bother me that I didn't have much of a say in the matter. I was happy to have some company during the long hours that Ruben spent working or hanging out with friends, because the house was large enough to accommodate everyone. What I did not anticipate was the way in which the presence of Caleb would completely alter the dynamics. Within the house, people were drawn to Caleb because he exuded a certain kind of charisma that made them want to be around him in a manner that Ruben never did. His dry sense of humor and contagious smile filled the empty places in the house by filling them with laughter. In the beginning, there were a few moments during the course of one morning I was working on trimming the hedges when Caleb came in with a cup of coffee, barefoot and still slightly drowsy. A sluggish grin appeared on his face as he leaned against the door and watched me work. I noted that you are awakening early. He gave a shrug and continued to sip his coffee. Cannot get to sleep to add insult to injury. Someone must admire all of the hard work that you are putting in out here. This made me giggle and I shook my head. Ruben should not be able to hear you say that. He is under the impression that this garden will take care of itself, Caleb responded in a casual manner, but with a hint of pointedness that Ruben doesn't notice as much as he should. I was taken aback by the comment, but I chose not to pursue him further on the matter. We continued to have lengthier talks throughout the course of the subsequent several weeks, and our interactions got more natural. During the time that I was preparing meals, Caleb would loiter around the kitchen telling me anecdotes about his time in college or gathering advice from me regarding how to apply for jobs. In the middle of the afternoon, I discovered him slouched on the couch in the living room drawing in his notebook. I asked, indicating the pad with my head, do you mind if I have a look before handing it up? He hesitated for a moment. Intricate pencil sketches, portraits, landscapes and abstract creations that appeared to come to life were scattered over the pages of the book. As I mentioned, these are quite remarkable and I am honestly astonished. Thank you, he said in a low voice. It is merely something I do to kill time. I suggested that you display these to someone other than yourself. There is an art director and a gallery. Your talent is very remarkable. Caleb, a smirk appeared on his face as he took my gaze. You are the very first person to make that statement. Because of the weight of his words which lingered between us, I had a stirring within me for the very first time, something that I was unable to precisely name. Then the belt incident occurred and things started to fall apart from there. Over the course of several days, the atmosphere between us was thick with tension and neither of us understood how to solve the problem. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to avoid being alone with him since the house was too silent and that it was too small. Each other continued coming into contact with us. I was in the middle of doing the dishes one evening when Caleb came into the kitchen with his hair still wet from taking a shower. Lena, he whispered to her. As soon as I heard my name, my heart began to race and I turned around. I inquired about it. I apologize for what happened 2 days ago. As he spoke, he stuffed his hands into the pockets of his jeans and muttered, "Ew, that was awkward." Immediately I turned my attention back to the sink and said, "It's fine, let's just put that out of our minds." His voice was hardly audible above a whisper as he stated, "I don't think I can." I became numb. His remarks were weighty and I felt a tightening in my chest. As a result, after turning to face him, I struggled to come to terms with feelings that I was unable to control. "We are unable to, Caleb." I started, but I was unable to complete it. As he moved closer, his stare remained completely fixed. "However, I don't want you to have the impression that it didn't have any significance for me." My mouth dropped open as a result of the ferocity in his voice, and for a little period of time none of us moved. The moment was abruptly broken when Ruben's voice could be heard calling out from the front door. As I hastily turned away from Caleb, I whispered, "I'll be right there." But even as I was leaving, I was aware that something had shifted in the situation. Over the course of the subsequent days, there was a lot of avoidance and sneaking looks. Caleb and I were left to negotiate this minefield that we had made, because Ruben continued to be unaware of the situation by either watching television or going out with friends. While I was folding laundry one afternoon, Caleb surprised me by appearing in the doorway in a Hesitant tone he inquired whether or not we could chat. A moment of hesitation preceded my nod. Do not open the door. He entered the building and then closed the door behind him. As he spoke his voice was rough. I don't know how to act around you anymore, he announced. Even though I was shaking, I told Caleb that we needed to let this go. There was only a brief pause. He said this as he moved closer to the situation, but it wasn't simply a minute. I do not agree. As soon as I realized that it wasn't simply a moment for me either. The night before Caleb gave me a kiss, there was no plan for it yet. It did take place when I finally retreated. I informed him that something like this could never happen again. Although he gave a slight nod, it was clear from the look in his eyes that he did not believe it. Immediately after the kiss, the days that followed were filled with a frenzy of stolen moments and quiet despair. Even though Caleb and I made an effort to act as if nothing had changed, the tension that existed between us was unmistakable. Each and every glance, as well as every inadvertent touch, were weighted with the weight of what we were not saying. Reuben continued to be unaware of the situation since his focus was divided between his work, his friends, and his never-ending hobbies. But despite the fact that he was preoccupied with other things, I couldn't shake the impression that we were playing with real fire. The garden was the location of the second occurrence of the said event. When I turned around, I saw Caleb standing behind me. I had spent the morning tending to the roses and the warm sun was shining down on my posterior. You're always out here, he murmured, his voice breaking through the silence that covered the room. My response was that it was quiet and I did not turn around. I was surrounded by a shadow. As he moved closer to reach me, I understand that you enjoy avoiding me. My chest tightened up, but I made a conscious effort to maintain my composure. Regarding what you imply, I am not sure. Or do you not? He inquired in a low voice but with a firm stance. This time there was no doubt and there was no moment when I could have stopped myself from turning to face him once more. He kissed me, and this time I returned the favor by kissing him. Something that started out as brief moments of yearning eventually turned into something that neither of us could stop. We were cautious at first, looking for places in the house where we wouldn't be disturbed and locating calm corners of the house. However, as time went on, we felt more confident and were unable to resist the attraction that was between us. Caleb and I found ourselves in the library one evening when Reuben was away attending a dinner for a client we were both attending. During the time that he was standing behind me, I pretended to order the shelves while my hands were shaking. The sound of his breath against my neck was pleasant and he mumbled, "You're shaking." At the same time that my voice betrayed me, I said, "I'm fine." To turn me around and face him, he placed his hands on my shoulders and turned me around. "Your fear is not warranted in any way. I told you that I won't be terrified of you." I was. I mumbled, my voice cracking even as I spoke. "I am terrified of what we are going to do." His eyes remained fixed on my face as he cupped his hands over it. Afterward, I stopped giving it any thought. "Take a seat next to me." My intention was to debate, even though I wanted to tell him that we couldn't continue doing this. I couldn't find the words to say it. Instead, I gave in and let him take me into his arms, and for the first time in what seemed like years, I experienced a sense of vitality. The fact that our connection was kept a secret only served to heighten the tension. Every moment that I misappropriated seemed like a defiance against the monotonous life that I had become accustomed to living, a reminder that despite the monotony of my marriage, there was still a desire that lay dormant beneath the surface. On the other hand, the fear accompanied the thrill. During the course of one afternoon, Reuben arrived home earlier than anticipated, and Caleb and I were sitting on the couch in the living room. He yelled out to Lena from the corridor behind him at the same time that Caleb was swiftly moving to the opposite side of the room. I jumped up immediately, my heart beating. I called in here, making an effort to maintain a calm tone of voice. Reuben came in and glanced between us. As he entered, the tone of his voice was casual, but his eyes continued to focus on Caleb. "Didn't realize you'd have company," he said. "I'm just trying to catch up," Caleb said in a seamless manner. His posture relaxed. The look that Reuben gave me as he walked away sent a shiver down my spine, yet he shook his head in agreement. The more careful we were, the more difficult it got to conceal ourselves. Reuben started asking questions which were initially not very direct but progressively became more pointed. One evening, as we were sitting At the dinner table, Dad made a statement that seemed to indicate that you and Caleb were getting along rather well. In response, I mustered up a smile and said that he has been a great help around the house. Reuben gave a slight nod, his emotion being indecipherable. It makes me happy to see it. It is comforting to know that someone is being there to keep you company while I am working. At the same time that I was feeling the blood drain from my face, his comments contained an undertone that I was unable to exactly pinpoint. When Dylan, Caleb's best buddy, showed up without prior notice, that was the moment when things started to look good. Dylan was a bold and outspoken individual who possessed a remarkable ability to detect things that others attempted to conceal. During one afternoon, Dylan told Caleb with a casual tone but piercing eyes that you had been spending a lot of time at home, more than you should have been. When asked about it, Caleb responded in a nonchalant manner. Dylan thought to himself, that must be nice. As he glanced over at me, being able to keep someone company at all times, I felt a chill run through my body as a result of the statements, and I decided to swiftly excuse myself, leaving the two of them alone. Subsequently, Caleb discovered me in the kitchen, his face strained with anticipation. He spoke in a low voice. Dylan is aware of something. Although my voice was trembling, I responded by saying, I'm guessing. The skull of Caleb was shaken. The man is not. The solution is going to be found by Reuben. As the weeks progressed, the stress that was present in the house became intolerable. The weight of our secret, Reuben's suspicions, and Dylan's comments all contributed to the feeling that it was a storm that was about to blow out. But even as the dangers increased, my feelings for Caleb continued to deepen. In addition, I was unable to force myself to let him go. Regardless of how deadly the situation became, keeping a secret is comparable to unable to breathe while submerged in water. Before the pressure begins to crush you, you can only continue doing it for a limited amount of time. The holes in our veneer were getting more and more obvious, despite the fact that Caleb and I were very excellent at concealed information. Reuben and Dylan were not blind. Neither of them were blind. Then there was Vanessa, Reuben's coworker, who was able to transform her casual visits into something that was more intrusive, despite the fact that she had not been invited. Vanessa showed up unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. Previously, she had paid a few visits to the residence, and each time she did so, she had always pretended that she was delivering something to Reuben. In this instance, she arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile that was unbelievably dazzling. As she entered the kitchen where I was chopping vegetables, she said, I thought I'd stop by. I was chopping vegetables at the time, trying to muster a smile. I responded, I'm fine. Vanessa positioned the bottle on the counter and leaned against the island, her eyes moving over the room as if she were making a list of every single aspect. This location is beyond stunning. You have done an excellent job of making it feel like a home is the right word. My tone was tense. When I expressed my gratitude, her eyes continued to fixate on the back door, which was the exit that Caleb had used just a few seconds before. Your presence, along with that of Caleb, is a blessing for Reuben. Isn't he a tremendously helpful person around here, or what? While my heart skipped a beat, I managed to keep a neutral expression on my face. He has done an excellent job. It's a pleasure to have him right here. The corners of Vanessa's mouth turned up into a smile that did not extend to her eyes. I have no doubt that it is. Vanessa's presence at the house increased in frequency as the weeks progressed. Beyond the initial period, she would always pretend that she was going to stop by for work, but I could see that her genuine intention was to gather information. She would find excuses to stop by. It was impossible for me to determine whether it was about Reuben or Caleb. She made this statement to me one afternoon while we were sitting in the living room. I get the impression that things haven't been going exactly as planned between the two of you, despite the fact that Reuben doesn't discuss much about his personal life. I became rigid, my fists clenching the teacup that was sitting on my lap. In an effort to maintain my composure, I stated that every marriage has its difficulties. Of course, Vanessa's smile was far too charming to be genuine, but I certainly believe that having Caleb in the room is beneficial. It appears like he is paying attention. It was obvious what was being implied, and I felt a mounting sense of panic in my chest. Afterwards, there was Dylan. In the past, Caleb's best friend had always been so forthright that it bordered on being impolite, but today his Remarks were much more pointed one evening while Dylan and Caleb were sitting on the terrace with beers in their hands. Dylan made the statement that you have been spending a lot of time with Lena. The tone of Caleb's voice remained casual while he did so. She is my stepmother. Obviously we are going to have a conversation. You're right, but that's not the only thing, is it? In a penetrating manner Dylan pressed his gaze. The hold that Caleb had on his bottle became stiffer. Which point are you attempting to make? I'm saying that you're acting strangely, Dylan responded. And I don't think it's only because of the things that are going on at work. A different thing is going on, and I believe that it has something to do with her. In a sudden and abrupt manner Caleb sprang up his chair, rubbing against the stone. In response Dylan narrowed his eyes and said, "You have no idea what you're talking about, will I not?" Eventually the tension in the house became intolerable. Walking a tightrope was the feeling I had from every meeting I had with Ruben. Every time Vanessa came to visit it seemed like a test that I was bound to fail like everyone else. Caleb was becoming more confident and his annoyance with our secret was growing. When we were sitting in the library one evening he turned to me with a serious expression on his face. "I am unable to continue doing this," he stated. When I responded to Caleb my voice was shaking as I said, "We need to be careful." He retorted that being careful was not sufficient. There is a suspicion that Dylan has Vanessa is looking around and Ruben is not as naive as you believe himself to be. I turned my head away, tears stinging my eyes as I did so. "What exactly are you recommending that we come to a halt?" With his voice becoming more kind Caleb stepped closer. "Despite the fact that I am aware that I am unable to accomplish that, we need to figure out what we are going to do, since this is not something that can be maintained in the midst of a dinner party that Ruben insisted on hosting." The breaking point eventually occurred naturally. Vanessa was present, and a couple of Ruben co-workers were also present. Along with her also present was Dylan, who had been invited by Caleb to attend the event. The beginning of the evening was a pleasant one, with pleasant talk, laughter, and the sound of wine glasses being clinked together. However, as the night progressed there was a change in the atmosphere. Vanessa's voice was able to pierce through the din of the conversation as she addressed Lena. "How do you manage to keep yourself engaged when Ruben is off for such a long time?" I become numb. The question she asked was dripping with presumption. Trying to maintain my composure I responded with the typical stuff, taking care of the garden, reading, and assisting Caleb with a few jobs. The grin on Vanessa's face darkened at that point. "You must be pretty near." Dylan, who was sitting across the table from Caleb, lifted an eyebrow and glanced in his direction. "Indeed, Caleb has been spending a significant amount of time in this location as of late. That makes perfect sense to me. Talking to Lena is not too difficult at all." The silence came to the table. The expression on Ruben's face was non-readable as he gazed between us. As Vanessa took a drink of her wine her eyes lit up with a look of contentment. Unexpectedly Caleb stood up just as he was exiting the room. He mumbled, "Excuse me." While I was standing up I swiftly said, "I think I'll check on him next." During my search I discovered Caleb walking around in the garden while the patio lights cast a gentle glow. While I was approaching he informed me that this was an error. With my heart pounding I inquired, "What was it?" His tone was tense when he said, "Any and all of it. Allowing Dylan to come here while acting as if everything is under control. On the contrary, Lena, it is in a horrible state." I stretched out to him and lightly touched his arm. "This will be resolved by us." Desperation could be seen in his eyes as he gazed at me. "How is it?" "Mostly due to the fact that I'm running out of methods to keep this together." We came to a complete halt when we heard footfall on the gravel, which occurred before I could answer. Ruben was seen standing at the edge of the garden, his figure appearing as a silhouette in the dim light. He questioned in a low and menacing tone, "What exactly is going on out here this moment?" The final confrontation was about to start, and all that we had concealed for such an extended period of time was about to be found out. Ruben observed us from the edge of the lawn, his stance stiff and his look icy as he stood there. This silence lasted for what seemed like an interminable amount of time. My friend Caleb and I stood there motionless, unsure of what to do next. This man's gaze was so heavy that it was suffocating. Ruben asked again, his tone low and menacing, "What exactly is going On out here my mouth was open, but I was unable to produce any words. Caleb and I shared a fleeting glance, and I was able to perceive the terror that was present in his eyes as I attempted to maintain a steady tone of voice and a forced smile. I stated that we had just been talking. There is nothing wrong. His attitude was indecipherable as Ruben's eyes darted back and forth between us. He spoke with a harsh tone, his words oozing with mistrust, and continued, "It's funny how the two of you seem to have so much to talk about." When Caleb straightened up, he tightened his jaw harder. "Ruben, is there a problem with this?" As Ruben moved nearer, a chilly smile formed on his lips and he took a step forward. "I'm not sure, but should there be anyway?" With each passing second, the tension between us seemed to increase and the air between us seemed to be becoming more dense. Within my chest I was able to feel the pounding of my heartbeat. Ruben was no longer merely speculating, he was aware of the situation. The puzzle had been put together by him at long last. After a moment of hesitation, Caleb gave a slight nod and then turned to go. Without uttering a single word, he murmured, "I'll go inside." Ruben shouted in a stern tone, "No, I'm sorry. You will remain in this location." When Caleb came to a stop, he did not move. Ruben refocused his attention on me, his eyes remaining cold as he did so. "Are you able to provide an explanation as to why my wife and my son are sneaking around in the garden when we are having dinner?" I attempted to speak, but the words refused to come out of my mouth because of the weight of the moment that was falling heavily on my shoulders. I was unable to speak and was frozen in place. Once again Ruben's voice broke the silence, and it was now impossible to deny that he had their suspicions. The following day Ruben's demeanor toward me was much more icy than it had been before. The cold gaze and clipped tone that he used made it very obvious that he was not going to let this go. Caleb made an effort to maintain his distance, but it appeared that his efforts were just making the situation worse. Naturally, Vanessa recognized an opportunity to incorporate herself into the mayhem that was occurring. The awkwardness that occurred the night before was something that I couldn't help but notice. Vanessa stated as she sipped her coffee in the kitchen, her voice dripping with a phony concern, "It was nothing more than a misunderstanding," I explained, making an effort to maintain a light and casual tone. Vanessa smiled all too sweetly as she inclined her head to the side. "It goes without saying, but Lena, you might want to use caution. One's perceptions can be extremely hazardous, particularly in a circumstance such as this one." I experienced a nagging feeling in my stomach. Not only did her remarks serve as a caution, but they also posed a threat. I could see the contentment in her eyes, and it caused my blood to immediately begin to run cold. Later on that day, Ruben phoned me and asked me to come into the study. Even though he appeared to be tranquil, there was an unsettling quality to the quiet that he exuded. Ruben leaned back in his chair and continued, "I've been thinking about how to proceed. Perhaps it is time for us to make some adjustments." "Alterations?" I asked with caution, my heart pounding in my chest. Ruben expressed it in a casual tone. "Caleb has been here for a sufficient amount of time. I believe that it is time for him to go on and find a place of his own." I was shocked by the news. "Ruben, he is still trying to process everything and he requires some time." Ruben's voice was stern as he interrupted what he was saying. "He can figure it out somewhere else. This cannot be contested in any way." Ruben made it abundantly plain that he was resolute in his intention to have Caleb depart, which contributed to the mounting tension. At long last, the encounter that had been building up to its climax achieved its breaking point. When I made the announcement to Caleb, his response was explosive. Caleb uttered the words, "He's kicking me out," with a tone of skepticism rising in his voice. "When it comes to what, are you having a discussion in the garden?" When I was trying to calm him down, I told him that he is suspicious. The skull of Caleb was shaken. "Do you agree with him that he has a feeling that something is going on? But that is not our problem, it is his." When I reached for his arm, I was attempting to pull him back. We were aware that this was a potential danger. We cannot allow this situation to continue to worsen. Caleb was angry with rage. "Even though he is suspicious, he is not acting in this manner, attempting to exert control over you is the reason he is doing it, but I won't allow him to succeed." The night that Ruben told Caleb to make his departure was the night that everything changed. The tone of Ruben's voice was icy and authoritative, and his demand was unmistakable while we were eating dinner. Reuben said in a calm voice, "You have a week to pack your things." In a sudden and abrupt manner, Caleb threw his fork into his plate and stood up. "You do not have the authority to decide when I will depart," he yelled. As Reuben responded, his tone was cold and he said, "This is my house and I will not tolerate this any longer." Anger began to rise in Caleb. "What are you able to tolerate? Why am I even here? Perhaps it's me growing closer to Lena than you could ever hope to be." There was complete stillness in the room. The weight of Reuben's scrutiny made my blood run cold. And I felt the weight of his face increasing in darkness. Although he was standing slowly, his voice had become low and menacing. "Before I make you regret your decision, you should leave this house." In the evening, I discovered Caleb in his room where he was packing his suitcase. At the same time that his fury had not subsided, mine had not either. "It is impossible for you to allow him to triumph," Caleb murmured, his voice tense with exasperation. My voice was quiet as I continued, "This is not about winning. This pertains to remaining alive." The intensity of Caleb's eyes caused them to burn. "Please do not remain in this location." "No, you are not required to remain with him." I remained silent as tears began to form in my eyes and mumbled, "I don't have a choice." Taking a step closer to me, Caleb stated that there is always an option available. "I invite you to accompany me." The words lingered in the air, and for a brief few seconds I gave it some thought. The option of starting again somewhere far away, of leaving everything behind and beginning things over again. On the other hand, the truth of what it would entail rapidly burst into my consciousness. I gave a slight shake of my head. My voice was shaking as I answered, "I am unable to." The look in Caleb's eyes changed, but he continued to nod. "Then I'll leave," he whispered to himself. "It's not over yet, though." Next morning, Caleb was not to be found. The stillness troubled me throughout the day, and Reuben did not speak to me. I spent the day walking around the house, which was empty. The true surprise, however, came later that evening when I discovered a message that had been tucked under the door to my bedroom. "You believe that you have triumphed, Reuben, but you are not aware of the reality. Honestly, I will make sure that you do it." To Vanessa. When I read the note, my hands began to shake. Vanessa was aware of it. She had witnessed something, she had overheard something, and now she was making use of it to its full potential. My hands felt as though they were holding a time bomb that was about to explode, and I remained there motionless, the words becoming hazy as I read them over and over again. I got in touch with Vanessa the following day. I trapped her in the kitchen, and as I approached her with the note in my hand, my voice was low and shaking. "Is this something?" I made a demand. Vanessa did not show any signs of flinching. A smirk played at the corner of her lips as she leaned against the counter during the conversation. "Without a doubt what it states. The reality is something that Reuben need to be aware of, don't you think?" I quickly stated, despite the fact that my voice was shaking, that there was nothing to tell. A mocking look of sympathy could be seen in Vanessa's eyes as she lifted an eyebrow. "Lena, you don't really believe that, do you? Oh, you shouldn't. You and Caleb have a way of looking at each other that I have witnessed. Neither am I blind." My chest tightened and I moved closer to the person while my voice became softer. "You are mistaken if you believe that you can exert influence over me by using this. I will not allow you to bring my family to ruin." Vanessa sent out a gentle chuckle while shrugging her head. "Make your family a living hell, Lena. You've already completed that task. This is nothing more than hastening the inevitable." I was unable to react because I heard Reuben's voice coming from the opposite end of the corridor. The grin on Vanessa's face became wider. She muttered, "Don't worry about it. I will take care of the timing." While Reuben was picking at his dinner that evening, he was more reserved than he normally is, and his attitude was tight despite the fact that Vanessa had left some hours before. Her presence continued to linger like a gloomy fog. The stillness that Reuben and I shared was oppressive and suffocating. At long last, Reuben sat down his fork and turned his attention to me. "Does Lena have something that you would like to share with me?" As he asked, his eyes became more narrow. My heart raced with fear and I froze in place. I mustered up a smile. "May I ask what you mean?" Reuben, who was sitting in his chair, leaned back and looked at me intently. "You have been behaving in an odd manner recently, too." Add insult to injury. Vanessa is constantly dropping hints about topics that I do not comprehend. Tell me about anything that's going on right now. If there is something going on, I found it difficult to maintain my composure. There is absolutely nothing going on, Ruben. All that Vanessa is doing is trying to cause a commotion. You are aware of her character. Ruben gave me a slow nod after observing me for a considerable amount of time. The tone of his voice was weighted with caution as he said, I hope you're correct, because if I find out differently. Although he did not finish the phrase, I am aware of what he was trying to say. The pressure was increasing steadily. I was unable to fall asleep that night. As I was lying in bed, a plethora of alternatives flooded my thoughts. The prospect of Ruben's developing skepticism felt like a ticking time bomb, and the warning that Vanessa had made weighed hard on me. When I was beginning to feel sleepy, my phone, which was sitting on the nightstand, started buzzing. While I was reading the message, my heart was pumping and I grabbed it. I will be waiting for you at the park beside the bridge tomorrow at noon. It's Caleb. When I left the house the following day, I pretended that I was going to run some errands. When I arrived at the park, Caleb was waiting by the bridge with his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. As I got closer, I told her that she shouldn't have gotten in touch with me. I am trembling in my voice, having a look of exasperation on his face. He responded, I didn't have a choice. I received a visit from Vanessa. What is it? I took a breath as my heart began to plummet. Does she know? Caleb gave a slight nod. Lena, she is aware of everything, and she is utilizing this information to get to Ruben. My stomach was in a spin. What was it that she said to you? He said it with a sour tone. She wants me to confess. Ruben is the one she wants me to disclose the truth to. The two of us are being played by Lena. I shut my eyes as the burden of all that was happening to me began to hit me. I hushed. We are getting close to the end of our time. Taking my hand, Caleb's contact helped me feel more grounded. After that, we need to take action before she does.